Ethan Carter stood silently in front of the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back at him. The reflection no longer showed a polished executive with a perfectly groomed salt and pepper beard or neatly combed hair. Instead, his skin was weathered from several sleepless nights, and his beard had grown into a rough stubble that hadn't seen a razor in days. A worn baseball cap concealed his messy hair, and his usual tailored suit had been replaced with faded jeans and a leather jacket long past its prime. This transformation wasn't accidental. Ethan needed to disappear, needed to become just another face in the crowd, a real customer. No one would believe a true motorcycle enthusiast looked like he'd just stepped out of a corporate boardroom. The idea had come to him during a restless night, while poring over customer satisfaction reports and dipping trend lines. The numbers seemed minor, barely perceptible, but to Ethan, a man who started with a small garage and grease-stained hands, every detail told a story. And something wasn't right. "Time to live my life again, in a different way," he whispered as he adjusted the fake glasses resting on his nose. It was the final piece of his new identity. Mark Thompson, a successful software engineer who had just cashed out stock options and was finally ready to splurge on his dream motorcycle as a midlife milestone. A cover story believable enough and close enough to the truth to be maintained. That morning, a brisk wind swept through as Ethan pulled into the customer parking lot of Carter Motorcycles, the very dealership he owned. No reserved parking space, no respectful nods from employees. Just the strange blend of nerves and nostalgia, like returning to a life he once lived but hadn't touched in years. The glass doors slid open, flooding the space with sunlight and revealing a gleaming showroom. The familiar scent of leather and polish lingered in the air, a design element he had insisted on long ago. But today it wasn't part of a marketing strategy, it was emotional. A scent from the past, a dream made real. "Welcome to Carter Motorcycles," a voice called out. It was Jessica. A newer sales associate he recognized from her personnel file, but had never spoken to in person. "Can I help you with anything today?" she asked with a friendly smile. Ethan feigned hesitation, raising his voice slightly to stay in character. "Just looking around, really. Been saving up for this for a while. It's kind of a dream from back in college I finally get to chase." Jessica nodded warmly. "If you're into sport bikes, the Ducati Panigale V4 just came in yesterday. It's a real masterpiece." For the next hour, Ethan threw himself into the role. He asked detailed questions and observed how different staff responded, from the genuinely enthusiastic to those clearly more focused on closing a quick sale. He made mental notes of strengths, weaknesses, and behavior, not just to evaluate, but to understand, to see the truth behind the polish he had once designed. When he expressed interest in the BMW S1000 RR10, the dealership's most expensive models, Derek, the sales manager, seemed to appear out of nowhere. His eyes quickly scanned Ethan's worn jacket, a slight frown flashing across his face. "Give me a second to grab the key and unlock the security chain," Derek said before walking away. Ethan straddled the bike, feeling the familiar ergonomics of a machine he'd once helped design. Emotions stirred, but he kept his cool, staying in character. Derek returned and began his pitch. He was smooth. Too smooth. Ethan quickly noticed sales tactics that walked the line, some even crossing into what he had strictly forbidden. "Honestly, I shouldn't be doing this," Derek leaned in with a hushed tone. "But you seem really serious. I'll see if I can talk to the owner about some wiggle room on the price. He's a numbers guy, very strict, but I've got some flexibility." Ethan almost laughed. He was the numbers guy. Things were getting interesting. He was about to press harder, curious how Derek would handle a more difficult negotiation, when a faint conversation behind him stopped him cold. Two other customers had stepped closer, speaking just low enough that most people wouldn't hear. But Ethan's trained ears, sharpened by the need to maintain his cover, picked up every word. "Get whatever bike you want, if you know the right guy," one said, his voice cutting through the pristine air of the showroom like a knife. "Yeah, but it's gotta be off the books. No receipts, no tracking," the other responded in a low, cautious tone. Ethan frowned. His hands tightened around the BMW's handlebars, the knuckles white beneath his carefully dirtied fingernails. 20 years. 2 decades of building a business on honesty, on making sure every sale was legitimate, every customer treated fairly. And now, right under his nose, someone was running a black market operation out of his dealership. He forced himself to appear relaxed, fiddling with the side mirrors while tuning in even closer to their conversation. Meanwhile, Derek kept droning on about financing packages, but the words had faded into meaningless noise. Ethan's mind raced, flipping through past discrepancies, vehicles marked as damaged, inconsistencies in inventory, late-night adjustments he'd chalked up to software bugs. Suddenly, it all made sense. "We'll have her think about it," he heard himself say, tone even, steady. "Big investment. I want to be sure." "Of course. Take your time." Derek handed him a business card, none the wiser to what was unfolding. Ethan nodded, stepped off the bike, and walked away. His legs felt weak beneath him, but his stride remained steady. He didn't dare glance directly at the 2 men, but his peripheral vision captured everything. One with his arms crossed, exuding forced calm, and the other, fidgeting, constantly checking a luxury watch that didn't fit the rest of his outfit. The showroom suddenly felt colder, despite the warm lighting. The perfect polish now seemed like a facade. Shadows lingered in corners Ethan had once proudly designed to evoke openness and trust. He wandered toward the vintage bike section. On the mirrored chrome of a restored Harley-Davidson, he could see the reflection of the 2 men. The tattooed one pulled out his phone, while the other guarded a bag close to his chest like it contained something priceless. "We'll get the number right here. Ray's been hooking people up for months. No complaints," the tattooed man muttered. "Ray." Ethan felt a jolt in his chest. Ray Martinez, his warehouse manager. The same man he'd trusted with late shifts, with redesigning inventory protocols. The same man who'd insisted on implementing a new tracking system just months ago. The same man, now at the heart of a criminal network. "All we gotta do is pick the bike," Ray marks it as damaged, then poof, it disappears on its way to the repair facility. The guy even did air quotes with his fingers. Ethan's body tensed to the edge of breaking. Reputation, insurance, legal documentation, the trust of his customer base. Everything was at risk, threatened by one rotten link in the chain. Every stolen motorcycle wasn't just a financial loss. It was a blow to his honor, a silent bullet piercing the heart of a lifetime's work. "What about the owner?" the man in designer clothes asked, skepticism in his voice. "Carter? He's too busy counting his millions to notice. Besides, Ray's cleaned it all up, swapped VINs with junk bikes. On paper, no one can spot a thing," the other man said with a chuckle. Ethan felt a sharp pain in his chest, not from the insult, but because, on some level, they were right. He had distanced himself too far from day-to-day operations. He had put too much faith in systems and in people. "When do we meet?" the man with the expensive watch asked, voice dropping. "Tonight, after 11 p.m. behind the service garage. Bring 40 grand. The Ducati's yours. No paperwork, no questions." Ethan felt like he had just taken another punch to the gut. The Ducati Panigale V4, his newest, most prized model, listed at nearly $780,000, 0 cents, now being sold like a back-alley trinket. No warranty, no legal transfer, and if word got out, his entire business could collapse. Just then, a bright voice from behind snapped him out of the spiral. "Need any help over here?" Jessica, when had she approached? He wasn't sure. Her warm, professional smile hadn't changed. But to Ethan, her presence was a reminder that not everyone was a traitor. There were still good people. People worth fighting for. He nodded and forced a small smile. It wasn't time to act. Not yet. But tonight, everything would change. Ethan forced a casual smile, masking the storm brewing inside. These vintage bikes always have a story behind them, don't they? He said, voice calm as if commenting on the weather. Patient to handle so much complexity. That's for sure. Well, Locke, he agreed, moving forward. Jessica replied, launching into a passionate explanation of the Bonneville line, from its early days dominating the speed scene to how its classic design still earned respect in today's motorcycle world. Her insight gave Ethan a legitimate reason to linger near the vintage section and bought him time to think. As Jessica spoke, the two men began making their way toward the exit. Before leaving, the tattooed one made a show of grabbing Derek's business card, calling out, "We'll definitely be back to test ride a few bikes. Gotta shop around, right?" The remark was clumsy theater, a weak attempt to mask a calculated crime. Ethan watched them disappear through the glass doors. His reflection in the window merged with rows of gleaming motorcycles, a faint silhouette, a ghost haunted by betrayal. That pride he'd felt walking into the dealership just hours ago had curdled into something darker. What once stood as a symbol of the American dream had become a front for predators. The place where he'd poured his heart was now being exploited by a silent criminal network. A new customer walked in, prompting Jessica to excuse herself. Ethan hardly noticed. His mind had already raced ahead. Every next step would need to be precise. He needed evidence, not suspicion, hard proof that could hold up in court. And more than that, he needed to grasp the scale of what he was up against. How many bikes were gone? How many people were involved? Was Ray the mastermind, or just another cog in something larger? The ambient music still played, light, cheerful, totally at odds with the gravity of his discovery. Ethan glanced at his watch. 2:30 p.m. 8.5 hours until the deal behind the service garage. 8.5 hours to decide how to move? He could call the police now, shut it down before another bike left the building, but the mechanic in him, the one who once worked nights repairing engines in a greasy shop, urged him to wait. Rushing in could mean missing something crucial. Ethan walked out of the showroom, still playing the role of the undecided customer. "Thanks for all your help," he called back to Jessica. "I'll think about it." The glass doors closed behind him, sealing away a world that had changed forever. The motorcycles in the display reflected the setting sun. Perfect glossy surfaces that hid the cracks now splintering beneath the company's foundations. Ethan knew tonight was only the beginning. Home wasn't an option, too easy to track. Instead, he ducked into a quiet coffee shop 2 blocks from the dealership. Choosing a seat in a back corner, he opened his laptop and logged into the dealership's internal system, a remote success feature Ray himself had suggested installing. Ironically, the trader had given him the very tool to expose him. "Can I get you anything else?" the barista asked, eyeing his untouched Americano. "I'm good, thanks," Ethan murmured, eyes glued to the screen. Data poured in. 6 months of inventory records stretched across the screen, each line, each entry, a potential breadcrumb. At first glance, it all looked normal, but Ethan didn't build a business empire by accepting surface-level answers. He began cross-referencing the VINs of damaged bikes with their original shipping manifests. A pattern emerged, subtle but consistent. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, like clockwork, a high-end motorcycle was marked damaged. The associated repair reports were perfect. Too perfect. Identical forms, identical codes, identical costs, identical phrasing. They were fake reports, no doubt about it. "Clever, Ray, but not clever enough," Ethan whispered. He opened another tab, Employee Schedules. Slowly, a clearer picture formed. Ray had subtly adjusted shift assignments, tiny changes, spread out over time, ensuring that he was alone in the warehouse during the windows when bikes went missing. His phone buzzed. Michael, the head of security, texting to ask why he hadn't shown up today. Ethan hesitated. Michael had been with him for 15 years. Loyal, trusted, just like Ray had been. Feeling a bit under the weather. Taking a day, Ethan replied. A lie. But a necessary one. He pulled up Ray's personnel file. It was spotless. Too spotless. The 3 resumes. 3 major motorcycle dealerships. At each one, Ray Martinez had worked exactly 2 years. No criminal record, no complaints, a spotless background. Words that once inspired confidence now sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He typed quickly, guided by the instincts of a man who had uncovered frauds with nothing more than a tiny inconsistency. The results hit like a bucket of ice water. The first dealership went bankrupt shortly after Ray's departure. The second experienced a warehouse fire, officially ruled an accident. Yet the investigation was riddled with contradictions. The third had shut down following an insurance probe that was never publicly disclosed. No one ever mentioned Ray, but the pattern was unmistakable. "You've done this before," Ethan muttered, his heart pounding as the truth lit up in his mind like high beams in the night. This wasn't a one-time theft. Ray was a professional. He moved from one dealership to another, setting up elaborate theft operations, then vanished before anyone caught on, like a virus, smart, silent, and deadly. Outside the cafe window, a familiar figure passed by, snapping Ethan out of his focus. Jessica, the young sales associate, walking slowly, glancing around nervously. Something about her posture, the tension in her steps. It didn't match the vibrant, confident woman he'd seen earlier that day. Ethan must have examined her employee file. She had been hired 3 months ago, right when Ray had requested an additional sales associate. Her resume, too, was perfect. Suspiciously so, as if tailored to slip past every background check. And then came the proof he didn't want to find. Jessica's employment history matched Ray's. Every dealership he had worked at, she followed a few months later. They were moving like a coordinated team. She wasn't just a sales associate, she was the front-facing link in the operation, while Ray ran things behind the curtain. The sense of betrayal hit Ethan harder than expected. He had admired her professionalism, her product knowledge, the way she handled customers, and now it had all been a performance. How many others were involved? How many people in his own company were just pieces in a rigged game? His finger hovered over the emergency lockout button. One click would freeze all operations and alert law enforcement. But a lifetime of business instincts made him pause. Ray and Jessica were good, but they couldn't have pulled this off alone. Someone had to be managing the paperwork, someone had to be laundering the money, someone was forging contracts and manipulating the transport logs. The cafe had started to empty. Through the window, Ethan looked at Carter motorcycles across the street, bathed in late afternoon light. A building once seen as a beacon of success now appeared more like a fortress hiding secrets. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Transaction confirmed. 11:00 p.m. Bring cash. They thought he was a real buyer. They must have gotten the number from the information form he filled out earlier under the alias Mark Thompson. Their arrogance was infuriating. They weren't even being careful anymore. They thought they were untouchable, but that would be their downfall. This wasn't just a stolen motorcycle anymore. This was Ethan's chance to expose the entire network threatening to destroy his life's work. He started preparing. No rash moves. He needed to record audio, video, and be ready to present undeniable proof, just in case things went sideways. As night fell, Ethan parked his rental car 3 blocks from the dealership. The Carter motorcycle's neon sign glowed blue against the dark sky. Once, that light symbolized ambition. Now, it looked like a beacon for criminals. He checked everything. Phone fully charged, handheld camera prepped, voice recorder hidden in his chest pocket already running. Just like the old days, back when he stayed up late fixing bikes in a garage. Only now, he wasn't repairing engines. He was trying to repair trust. 10:15 p.m. The back service lot was cloaked in darkness, save for a few scattered security lights. Ethan crouched behind an old delivery truck, scanning the employee parking area. One vehicle stood out, a black Civic. Ray's car. The side door of the warehouse opened, casting a dim yellow glow onto the concrete. Ray stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly with his free hand. Gone was the calm and collected man from earlier. Now, he looked cornered. A second figure stepped out from the shadows. Jessica, dressed in all black, her expression was icy and hardened. No longer the warm, approachable salesperson. Now, just another accomplice. They were arguing. Even without sound, Ethan could read the desperation in their body language. Something had gone wrong. The pressure was mounting. Palm door bed. 10:45 p.m. A white van rolled in, lights off. It crept toward the loading dock, backed into position by the roll-up door. The driver didn't exit, just waited in silence. Ethan whispered to himself, "All right, show me what you're really doing." The engine idled quietly in the dark as two more employees wheeled out a motorcycle wrapped in moving blankets. Even through the covers, Ethan recognized the unmistakable shape. The Ducati Panigale V4R, his dealership's crown jewel. It had never even been started, much less ridden. Ethan held his breath, gripping the camera tighter, recording everything. Faces, license plates, every time-stamped movement. Each frame cut into him like a blade. But something still didn't add up. Ray looked panicked. Jessica was clearly on edge, and there were more people than usual. The pace was frantic. They were scared. Scared criminals make mistakes. At exactly 11:00 p.m., a sleek black SUV glided into the lot. The flashy customer from earlier, the one with the designer watch, stepped out, flanked by two new faces who moved like trained operatives. Ethan didn't need to guess. They weren't just shady buyers. This was organized crime, and tonight, they weren't taking one bike, they were taking everything. Ethan glanced at his phone. 11:03, a second van pulled in, then a third. The once silent loading zone erupted into a covert frenzy. Bikes rolled out, one after another, each one representing tens of thousands of dollars. And the destruction of everything Ethan had built. His finger hovered over the emergency call button, direct to the police chief he'd spoken with earlier. One press, and the lot would be crawling with squad cars. But something made him wait. A gut instinct, sharpened by decades of business experience, told him the last piece hadn't been revealed yet. 11:15, another SUV crept into the lot. Ethan's stomach dropped. Michael, his longtime head of security, the man who had been with him since the beginning, stepped out and greeted Ray with a handshake too smooth to be improvised. It was rehearsed, familiar, chilling. The final piece clicked into place. Michael, who controlled the security systems. Ray, who manipulated inventory. Jessica, who gained customer trust. A perfect triangle of deception, each one positioned exactly where they could do the most damage, and they had all blinded Ethan in different ways. But the question still lingered. Why tonight? The answer emerged from the darkness, closing the trap. Eric, the sales manager, walked in, holding a stack of papers. Ethan recognized them immediately, contracts for the new inventory system set to launch the next morning. A system that would have made the entire scam impossible to maintain. They weren't just stealing bikes anymore. They were fleeing. And they were taking everything they could before the sun came up. They weren't just stealing bikes anymore. They were fleeing and taking everything they could with them. Ethan reached for his phone, ready to hit the emergency alert button, when headlights suddenly swept across the lot, cutting through the night like a blade of white light. A booming voice followed from a loudspeaker, firm and final like a sentence being handed down. "This is the police. Everyone freeze, hands in the air. Shouts erupted. Engines roared, tires screeched against concrete. Chaos exploded in an instant. Ethan spotted Ray sprinting toward the back fence, dragging a heavy duffel bag. Without hesitation, Ethan jumped into his rental car, gunned the engine, and sped around the corner to block Ray's escape. Ray stopped cold as the vehicle skidded to a halt, his face flashing with disbelief. Ethan stepped out slowly, never taking his eyes off the man who had betrayed him. "Going somewhere, Ray?" he asked, his voice as cold and sharp as a drawn knife. "To the table." Glinting under the harsh security lights, Gainley submit to the input of the stacks of cash, spilled out. Bound in tight bundles. "You," Ray spat. "I should have known. Ethan Carter never lets anything slip past him." Ethan stepped forward, blocking the path behind him. "I just wanted to know if our customers were satisfied," he said calmly. "You, though, you were a little too eager to express your dissatisfaction." Under the flashing red and blue lights, Ethan saw Jessica being led away in handcuffs, her face pale and blank. Michael stood, surrounded by officers, head bowed, silent. Derek flailed as he tried to explain himself to a detective. No one was listening. Ray glanced around before leaning in, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You have no idea what you've stepped into. This is bigger than your precious dealership." Ethan didn't respond, but in his eyes burned more than anger. It was unwavering resolve. He knew this night wasn't the end. It was just the doorway into a deeper, darker truth. "Much bigger than your little dealership," Ray growled, eyes burning with rage. "We're connected to the Golden Chain Gang." But Ethan cut him off before he could gloat. "Hell, that catch my eye. I figured that out after our little cafe chat. Every dealership you worked for had one thing in common. They were laundering money for organized crime." Ray's face went pale. A flicker of panic flashed in his eyes. His hand twitched, moving toward his jacket, but Ethan was faster. Muscle memory from college wrestling kicked in. With a swift leg sweep, he sent Ray crashing to the concrete. A loud thud echoed as two officers rushed in and handcuffed him. "Mr. Carter?" A tall woman in a dark suit approached, flashing an FBI badge. "I'm Special Agent Saren. Thanks for your cooperation tonight. What you did helped us crack a case that spans 3 states." Ethan looked around as federal agents flooded the lot, collecting evidence, inspecting motorcycles, seizing documents. "Months, so you've been watching them for a while." "Yes." Saren nodded. "The Golden Chain Gang has been using motorcycle dealerships as money laundering fronts for years. They plant people like Ray to build the operation from within, and use the missing bikes to transport cash across state lines. And you didn't know where they'd strike next until I called today?" Ethan asked, piecing together the final parts of the puzzle. "Adley." "Exactly," Saren replied. Shouts rang out near the warehouse. Michael was being dragged away, yelling and flailing. "It's him. Carter. He knew the whole time. He's been splitting the profits with Ray." Saren raised an eyebrow. "Interesting, considering we have 6 months of surveillance proving Mr. Carter had no involvement. Unless Michael can explain how he was running the operation and helping us investigate it at the same time." Michael's face drained of color. He crumbled, but it was Derek who caught Ethan's attention. The once confident sales manager stood frozen, white as a ghost, eyes locked on his phone, hands trembling. "Here?" "Ether Saren." Ethan nodded in Derek's direction. "I think you'll want to see that." Saren signaled her team. 2 agents closed in and snatched the phone, and just like that, Derek collapsed under the weight of it all. "The accounts. The numbers. It's all in there," he stammered. "Ray said if we ever got caught I could use it as leverage. I didn't think it would go this far." Ethan stepped closer, voice low and sharp as steel. Ray told you I was behind it, that you were just following orders, didn't he? Derek nodded slowly, shame clouding his eyes. The full picture finally came into focus. They hadn't just stolen bikes. They'd built a fake trail, falsified paperwork, forged documents, manufactured evidence, all pointing to Ethan. If they ever got caught, it would look like the operation came from the top. A clever, calculated, and cowardly insurance policy. Saren sighed. It's a common tactic. The gang creates a paper trail implicating the dealership owner. When the operation's exposed, the owner usually takes a plea deal to avoid a longer sentence. But this time, Ethan said, a quiet smile forming, they didn't count on the owner doing his own investigation. Jessica was the last one escorted past him. No sweet smile, no friendly charm. Just a cold, empty stare. You know, she said bitterly, if you weren't so obsessed with customer satisfaction, we'd be gone by morning. New identities, new targets. We had it all ready. That's not funny, Ethan replied, staring straight at her. It's just sad. Sad that trust meant so little to you. Police sirens echoed as patrol cars drove away. Seized vehicles were towed, and criminals led away in cuffs. Ethan stood alone in the quiet service yard, bathed in the soft glow of the Carter motorcycle sign. Alone. Again. But this time, it wasn't loneliness. It was rebirth. We'll need your help cataloging the thick folder. We'll need your help cataloging the stolen inventory, and, you should know, this gang might try to retaliate. No need, Ethan said firmly. A plan had already taken root in his mind. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he reached his PR team. His voice was clear, steady, like a Ducati engine revving to life. We're putting out a press release first thing tomorrow. I want every news outlet, every network across the Pacific Northwest to know. Carter Motorcycles helped the FBI bring down a federal crime ring. He looked up, eyes burning with purpose. Either tomorrow, no gang will dare come near us. Too public, too risky. Mr. Carter? A voice called out as Agent Saren approached her car. She turned back, curiosity in her eyes. Just wondering, why did you go undercover yourself? You could have hired a private investigation team. Ethan looked up at the Carter Motorcycles sign, still glowing brightly against the night sky, though beneath it, darkness had once run deep. He replied, his voice warm and reflective, because sometimes the only way to protect what you've built is to remember why you built it in the first place. 3 months later, Carter Motorcycles had come back to life, as if infused with new energy. Morning sunlight streamed through the newly installed smart glass, a part of a comprehensive security upgrade that had transformed the dealership into one of the most secure in the industry. Without losing its friendly, approachable charm, Ethan stood quietly in the middle of the showroom, watching a young couple take photos beside a brand-new Triumph Street Triple. Their smiles reminded him of a simpler time when he was just a mechanic with a dream, to bring the joy of riding to as many people as possible. That joy had never changed. Mr. Carter, a familiar voice called. He turned to find Linda, once an FBI agent, now head of security at the dealership, approaching with a tablet in hand. No one had expected her to take the job offer after the arrests, but she wanted to start fresh, to apply her investigative expertise to the business world, and Ethan had given her that chance. The quarterly audit is in, she said, a subtle smile at the corners of her mouth. I think you'll like what you see. Ethan scrolled through the report. Everything matched. Not a single missing vehicle. Every transaction accurate. But what pleased him most were the customer satisfaction scores. Higher than ever before. Linda guided him through the warehouse, pointing out features of the new system. GPS units discreetly installed in every high-end model, ownership records verified through blockchain technology, unforgeable, undeniable, trustworthy. The service department now looked more like a high-tech lab than a traditional garage. Every tool was trackable, every repair was documented with video, and every part could be traced through a closed, secure supply chain. The best part? Linda grinned. That crew in Portland last week? They didn't even get out of the parking lot. Ethan chuckled. He remembered the news segment. Copycats trying to pull a similar scam at Pacific Motors were caught immediately, thanks to the inter-dealership alert system he had designed in the aftermath of his own case. The warehouse doors slid open to reveal a group of young people gathered near the training area. Ethan broke off from the tour and walked over. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice warm and welcoming. The fresh faces turned toward him, a mix of excitement and nervousness. These weren't just new hires, they were the first members of his Second Chance program, created to offer opportunities to individuals with minor criminal records who were committed to turning their lives around. "As you may have heard," Ethan began, "this warehouse was once the center of a criminal operation, but instead of letting that define us, we chose to learn from it." He gestured around them, to the transparent walls, the open layout, the cutting-edge security. Everything you see here was designed with two goals: to protect our inventory, and more importantly, to protect trust. He paused, locking eyes with each of them. "And the most important part of our security system isn't the cameras or the GPS. It's you." A young man raised his hand. Jake, a former street racer who had served time for illegal racing, spoke hesitantly but with sincerity. "I just want to say, thank you for trusting us." Ethan smiled, memories of his own missteps flashing through his mind. "Trust isn't given," he said, "but it is something anyone can earn back." Right then, the sound of a motorcycle engine echoed through the warehouse. A customer test-driving a new model. It wasn't just the sound of an engine. It was the sound of life returning. "Linda." Ethan turned, eyes lighting up. "Let's move up the Renaissance Project." Her eyes widened. "The Community Outreach Initiative? But we weren't launching that for another month." "Life's too short to wait on a good idea," Ethan interrupted, already composing an email to his leadership team. The Renaissance Project's His Passion initiative would offer free motorcycle safety courses, mentorship for at-risk youth, and partnerships with local law enforcement to promote legal, responsible riding. The young couple from the showroom walked by, now proud owners of the Triumph they'd admired. Their faces glowed, not just because of the bike, but because they now belonged to something bigger. This was what Ethan had always wanted to build. Not just a dealership, a community, a place where trust was restored, connections were forged, and transformation was possible. The golden rays of sunset stretched across the polished floor, casting long shadows of people and machines. Ethan walked slowly, his eyes scanning each corner. Every space held a memory, some painful, some triumphant, but all of them the foundation for what had come next. "It's time for the team meeting," Linda said, checking her watch. Ethan nodded, walking forward with quiet satisfaction. His dealership wasn't just safe again. It was thriving. The place that once hid in darkness was now a beacon of light. The walls that once echoed with doubt now stood on trust, and the betrayal that once threatened to destroy everything had given birth to a movement for second chances. As he entered the meeting room, greeted by faces both new and familiar, Ethan knew one thing for sure. Carter Motorcycles was back, not just as a brand but as a symbol. A new road had opened, and this time it led toward a future where trust, integrity, and redemption weren't just ideals, they were the very foundation of something extraordinary.